Good morning, folks.
Good morning, Sam.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I was about to chastise you, Keith, for not saying good morning, but you beat me to
Well, I have a thorough mic check this morning. Thank you all.
It was peer pressured.
it.
Man, we are such bullies. The Good Morning Mafia. Is that a thing?
Let's make it a thing.
It is now, yeah. It's like when everyone's on camera in a call, except for one person. You can almost feel the intensity of pressure on that one person to go on cam.
Yeah, I don't give into that too often. It depends on the call. Like, I'm happy to share my generally disheveled self, but like sometimes I'm on a business call unexpectedly when I probably would have liked to look nicer. So it depends.
I love the phrasing. Probably would have liked to have looked nicer.
If I probably had slightly more respect for my appearance than I actually do. It's a good thing this is still recording. Now it's preserved for posterity.
What's that about working from home? We all work in our pajamas or something like that?
Well, no, but like, I don't always like make sure my hair looks normal.
I just remember hearing all the stuff online about like, oh yeah, working from home, you don't have to get dressed in the morning, you can stay in your pajamas or whatever.
Right. So the one video I recall is the one guy who gets up, like his dogs are barking or something. So there's like two guys and a lady, and the guy gets up to like shut the door because it's like dog is barking, and he's got a suit jacket on and a white shirt, but he's like wearing basketball shorts, right? And he came back and then realized what had happened, was all sorts of embarrassed. And the other guy in the meeting made an excuse to get up, and he too had a dress shirt and a jacket on and basketball shorts. So I thought that was pretty funny.
Excellent.
I think it was his boss, if I remember the way it played out right. So his boss saved him the embarrassment of being the only one. But
And what does
yes,
that tell you? Or at least it tells me that nobody likes to wear suits and ties.
no man, I prefer not. I have on occasion. I will if necessary, but
Going back about sort of dating me a little bit, going back about 20 years. No, the private sector stuff. It was kind of like a necessity. You wore shirt and tie and suit for most things, and it's changed so quickly. Like if the same situation now, it would be much more rare.
yes, I think it's become much more casual. But I mean, I don't mind dressing up, but it's like for my wife or for a church thing, right? But for like daily business, I'd rather not. Besides, how am I supposed to wear my open source T-shirts if I can't wear T-shirts?
It's a great point, Sam.
They don't hand out open source dress shirts. I'm just saying.
Underneath the jacket is just fine.
That's true. Actually, it's really funny when you see like Werner Vogels or something from Amazon, right? Get up on stage because he generally has a jacket over a t-shirt. It's often a band for his particular case. But yeah, you're right. That is the nice way of dressing up if you don't really want to wear a shirt and tie. I don't. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Anyway, good, good. All right, we're approaching quorum here. We're probably there. And I never stopped recording, so all of our banter is preserved. Sorry, everyone who's listening, but we'll get started now. Welcome to the 157th of January, Just kidding. It's the 31st of January 2024. This is a Hyperledger call, and so the antitrust policy and the code of conduct are in effect. The agenda for this meeting can be found in the link in the chat. It is, of course, on the Hyperledger Wiki under Aries in the Aries Working Group call. For some reason, the wiki is not doing live collaborative editing mode. I'm not sure why. And while I look into that, stuff will not be live updated on my screen, even if I'm in edit mode while you're doing it. I want the live edit mode back, but in the meantime, because it helps with collaborative note taking, but in the meantime, just be aware that's a thing. It's a feature of Confluence, but I think it may have been disabled either intentionally or accidentally, and I haven't got to the bottom of that yet. So, is there anyone new that would like to introduce themselves today? All right. Any announcements we should have on our list but don't, since the list is empty? All right. Any projects want to share any release status or work updates?
Yeah, it looks like you already have it. 12.0 is out. RC0 of Akapai. 1.0 will be pending right after. We're doing a checklist of exactly what should be in 1.0. So the checklist will let us drive that down. And yeah, make that available.
Right, said we have to disable it because it causes the wiki to crash. Well,
Well,
that's
that sucks.
unfortunate.
Yep.
I feel like we've been using it for like 17 years, and then all of a sudden they turn it off. But maybe it's a newer release or something that's of Confluence that's causing that to crash. You know, I really wish the GitHub Wiki thing would work out live editing. I realize it's complicated because you needed to have like versioned in attribution and all that stuff, but boy, would that be nice to have collaborative editing on a GitHub Wiki. Okay, well, that's my New Year's resolution for somebody else. Cool. Also, on Akapai, Daniel Bloom is not here to defend himself, so I will blame him, sir, for some progress. There is an open PR to Akapai. This is 2748, with some updates to fix issues. But the milestone achieved with the stuff in the PR is that Daniel successfully made a DIDCOM v1 connection between Akapai and Credo using DIDPeer 4. And so that's a nice milestone for the work on the community coordinated update. And he's got that PR in there to resolve some of those issues there. There's also a PR open onto Credo for the other stuff. Credo being, for those that have not heard, the renamed AFJ. Aries Framework JavaScript is now Credo under the Open Wallet Foundation. So yes, awesome progress there. Any other work updates that folks want to share?
I can give an update on the work that I've been doing in Akapai.
Please.
I've implemented the DRPC protocol. It's complete. I'm finishing up integration tests, and I should be able to demo that really soon.
Awesome. And this is the one that Steve has talked about recently. So that would be cool to see the implementation.
For sure. Yeah.
Excellent. Any other updates folks want to share? All right. A couple things on our agenda. There's some testimonies, examples of use. Excellent, Stephen. Thank you for the annual report update. Quick request for demos, interop targets, and then onto the main business, which is considering some RFC status changes, and one PR4 review that I think is ready to merge. Any adjustments, rearrangements, changes we want to make to the agenda before we get going? Alrighty then. Alex, do you want to talk about the testimonials piece?
Yeah, for sure. So we had our monthly Aries marketing working group meeting yesterday. And one of the topics we covered was about testimonials for Aries. And the point of this is, how can we demonstrate interest, support, great projects happening with Aries. And the key thing is just to get, even if it's 1, 2, 3, a handful of quotes from people, it will help demonstrate the success of Aries and the community support and the great things being done with it. So to that end, there's a form link there, which is just a Google Forms I've hosted, and it's a chance to put in a short statement of whichever type of support, like, why you think it's important generally, or your success in using it, or whatever that may be. And as you'll see on the form, it can be anonymous or as not as you wish. So if you're working for a company and you can't really have the company's name there, but you wish to put a quote in, then we can fully support that. And the final strand of that is as well, is that as well as a testimonial quote that we'll use in a few places, like just on the Aries wiki landing page to show the great stuff being done. If you've got a demo or an example of Aries in use that you'd be willing to share and promote, we can help with that. Not only for the benefit of Aries, but for the benefit potentially of your projects. You get some more visibility and people seeing it and seeing what you've done with it. So hopefully there's benefits all round. And on that form, there's a little option at the end of, hey, can we get in touch about any demos or things you want to highlight to the community? But first and foremost, it's about testimonials and support to get people excited about it. Hopefully the form is self-explanatory. Any questions, please reach out to Helen or myself, and we can come back to you as well. Helen, is there anything else you want to add to what I've said there?
No, not at all. But aside from the testimonials, we also spoke about doing quarterly kind of update type blogs for the Hyperledger blog that gets really good circulation rates. And then also we are still looking at doing an interop event. I'll be posting in Discord to start a thread around what types of tests and interop tests that you all would want to try to conduct. Sam's initial idea was to wait to do an interop event until there's a major milestone like DidCon V2 or something like that. But I'm going to put it out there to see if anybody is interested in getting together and testing against one another, what types of tests that you would want to conduct. So I will watch out for that note on Discord, and please chime in there if you are interested in participating. And then we'll start kind of collecting feedback and putting together ideas for that event. But yeah, those are really the big three. The kind of the support testimonial page, or project, and then the blog that we'll be working on, probably based off of Stephen Curran's work that he's been doing on the yearly report from last year. And then, the interop event. So again, these are monthly. They're the last Tuesday of the month. If you or somebody on your team is kind of in the communications, project management, kind of external facing type role, then we would love to see them on the call and have them participate, or have you participate if you'd like to do that as well. They don't have to be, all are welcome. You don't have to be in marketing or communications to join. If you're just curious about what we talk about, we'd love to see you there.
Awesome. The discussion of interop targets is I was going to get, but Helen beat me to it. It's an important thing, and it doesn't have to be something huge. It can actually be something quite minor. Stephen's hinted that Akapai is creeping up on completion of AIP2, which is a fantastic marker. So it doesn't have to be something far away or necessarily something huge, but getting together and making stuff work together that way, I think would be good, and maybe even more useful with Credo being in the Open Wall Foundation, to have an event and invite them and any other projects that would like to get together and work some of that stuff out. But having some sort of specific thing that we are targeting for test allows us to develop to it so that we can have stuff ready by the time that happens. So any thoughts here? Helen mentioned a thread in Discord, but any thoughts that anyone has to share now would be awesome. All right. Also, request for demos, and I'm not expecting anything right now, but we'd love to see stuff. I love seeing stuff, even if it doesn't. It can be, of course, a deployed thing or a company thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be an open source contribution, but something that leverages Aries would be really fun to see. As well, of course, as features in the software would be awesome. So we discussed, for example, seeing the tunneling of JSON RPC that we've discussed recently, and that stuff would be pretty great too. So please do reach out, and I'd very much love to have those things. Doesn't have to be long either. Even just 5 minutes or 10 minutes or something is amazing, and adds a lot of spark to our meetings, which I really appreciate. Cool. Any other comments on those topics? Stephen, I think you're now up for the Aries annual report.
Okay. There isn't much to add other than by end of day, I should be converting this into a GitHub pull request that will go in. So I'll put an announcement with a link to the PR for that. So if you have any last minute updates, or if you haven't had a chance to read through it yet, please do so today and add any comments or sections, any updates, any comments, whatever you need. I haven't put in any request for guidance from the TOC. So please put those in. You can even do it real time. Collaborative wiki editing. Oh yeah. I will check on that. Maybe we'll talk about it at the TOC. I'll raise it as a topic.
I'm only slightly joking. It's incredibly
yes.
useful to have live editing on an agenda so that we can take notes.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
But if we actually mention this, then they'll know that it's an important feature that we miss.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't mean to like rain on Rye. He does good work, but that would be amazing to have.
Yeah. So yeah, as I say, that comes through. Tomorrow is the first of the annual reports to be presented, so I'll learn more about that. I expect either next week or the week after the identity related projects will all be presented at the TOC. So I'll be going over those for the TOC, and there'll be a couple of TOC members with particular questions and the like.
Awesome. And do you have a date for the TOC call?
I do not. As I say, it's either next week or the week after, and I'll make sure to post it in the Aries channel of Discord.
Please do noise it about so that we can attend.
Yeah, it won't be. It could be as a week from tomorrow, so it would be the day after this meeting next week.
Right. And that's the earliest?
Yes, that's the earliest it would be. It won't be before that. TOC
Cool.
meetings are every Thursday, and it's definitely not on the agenda this week.
Sweet. Thank you for your work there. Last chance to take a pass at the Aries draft report, and that's awesome. Cool. Anything else on the annual report? Oh, Stephen, I wanted to mention, I brought this up to Helen as something that could actually turn in, not the obviously verbatim as it is, but the work that you've already done to write this up would actually make a pretty good blog post about the status of Aries.
Yeah,
I don't
that'd be great.
know how Hyperledger feels about that, but I'm going to let that be Helen's problem.
That'd be awesome, Helen.
They will be psyched for the blog. So whatever we want to put in there, it's they defer to the community, which is really nice. So I'm sure they love it.
Awesome.
If there's one truth, the people in charge of posting to a blog are generally thrilled to have contributions.
Yeah, I know.
So
yeah,
that's for sure.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Awesome. And that way we can put a little bit more legs on your work there, Stephen. So appreciate that. Cool. Okay. RFC status changes. This is something that we talked about last week for things that we would like to propose changing the status of. And so I have gone through the list here, and I have some of my own, but I'm curious if anyone else had identified an RFC that they'd love to see the status change that we can add to our list to review today. All right. Well, I'm glad I did this then. I wanted to quickly review the RFC lifecycle that is defined here in the Aries RFC repo. Proposed, demonstrated, accepted, adopted, and retired. So anything, the barrier for proposed is very low on purpose. In the sense that they are proposed, they can be documented. There's a thing that we can link to it and make stuff like that work, and make that happen. Daniel, which RFC is the SIG decorator?
I'll have to pull up a link. I noted that mentally last week when we talked about it, but I should go and pull up the actual links. Hold on.
Okay, cool. So, and then demonstrated means there's code, which is really good. This also, we'll have to talk about this as well. It also mentioned that tests should exist. I don't know which repo this actually links to. This is the protocol test suite instead of the Aries agent test harness. So we need to talk about this. But before we do that, accepted means there's sufficient consensus for the RFC. And it indicates the test must have reasonable tests in the test suite repo, but again, this links to the not the active one. And then, but the idea here is that this is clearly got to the point where we have made some progress here. Adopted basically means that it is there. It's a de facto standard is kind of what it's being described as part of that process. And then lastly, retired indicates that an RFC is no longer in use in the community in a substantial way. And so stuff that we don't really want new people to stumble into directly and isn't really relevant anymore. We don't have very many retireds. I'm proposing that we move one to retired, but that's kind of the status that we go through. The only open questions in my mind is that we probably ought to update the definitions surrounding tests and what we actually think there, and whether we want to adhere to that strictly for our movements with statuses today. And Kim has his hand up.
Yeah, I had two questions, Sam. The first one is there was some talk about coming up with a new category for the RFCs to fit in. And if we were going to do that before reviewing all the RFCs, that might be valuable. And then the second question that I had was with the diff taking ownership of some of the protocol, should some of these be, I'm not sure retired would be the right word, but migrated to the diff ownership?
That's an interesting item for status. Quickly on the different types, we have features and protocols listed here, and I think that the status is a little bit orthogonal from the type. Although we also need that discussion, but I think we can safely talk about the status today without having to solve the type one at the same time. But I don't know the right thing to do about stuff that has migrated, particularly since a lot of the stuff that has migrated is really just links back to these RFCs rather than being actually hosted somewhere else. That's a little bit complicated because there's some forward progress really necessary on the didcom.org side with the didcom users group before we could really make a corresponding change on this side. So I suspect what we want to do is note that that's something we need to address and then come back to it to hit it a little bit more specifically for those particular cases.
So I would propose that we add a new status of moved to support the change of ownership of the RFC ownership, so that there's a clear change of ownership of that RFC when that does occur.
I love that idea, actually. And what we can do is we can make sure, like retired, we can require that there's a superseded by or a new location that's added to the top of the RFC so that it's clear where it moved to, which I think would be awesome. So great suggestions, Kim. And do those responses and plans satisfy your comments?
So the question about categories, I'm not sure it was fully answered.
Well, I think we need to like address that, but we don't have to do it today. The status is a different dimension on the graph, if you will, than category.
All right, that's fair.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's what I meant before. Communicate well.
If I could make some comments on that, I think while move is a reasonable thing to do, we should not be generally moving these. I would much prefer to see that we make didcom.org a not a diff set of protocols, but rather any didcom protocols, and that one source of them be Aries, another source be diff, RFCs, and anything else. And so that the actual didcom.org is actually a multi-sourced publication, if you will.
I don't disagree at all. There's two nuances there. One is that right now it simply links. The stuff is listed, but then just
exactly
links.
That's a disaster.
And so there's that discussion. The other thing is about the location of where any particular protocol should actually be worked on. And sometimes there's not contention around that, and everyone kind of agrees, and sometimes there is. And so, for example, if we're going to talk about the credential exchange protocols, which have historically been in Aries, whether they should continue to be defined in Aries or whether they should be defined elsewhere is a bit of an open conversation. And so that's another one that we need to come back to pretty quick, but again, a little bit orthogonal to our work today.
But even if they were discussed in diff circles, they would be the version 3. And that's a different protocol from the version 2. And therefore, there's still 2 versions, multiple versions. So yes, it's not actually too contentious, I don't think.
Well, it just depends if one community wants to do the definition here or there, is really where it comes down to. And so, we haven't really had that conversation either place yet. So
okay,
we'll see how that shakes out. And we can definitely talk about that. Cool. So I've got some suggestions here. We added attachments. I should probably call this credential attachments to describe those two. Okay, so what
attachments, actually. Oh, and 510 is on that as well.
Is that on the same list? Okay.
On the same list, yeah. 510 is presentation exchange.
Okay. So, okay. So it's been a while. Here is, by the way, so here's just the root of the Aries RFC repo and the README that's there, which is where the lifecycle doc is. Here's the index. The index is auto-generated by code. And so one of the things that would need to happen, for example, to add a new category of RFC would be some minor adjustments to the code to make that occur, which is not a huge thing, but because this is auto-generated. And we have discussed making this pretty. Again, that's also useful, but not exactly the work that we're doing here today. And these changes will be helpful in the future anyway. So we have one adopted, and this is adopted because it signals the completion type. This is a community coordinated update, and it signals the completion of this. And this is very thoroughly adopted. And so I'm actually proposing that we move it to retired simply because it isn't useful to new members of the community. It was only useful historically. And so one of my proposals here is that 348 actually be changed to retired, which will send it all the way down to the list. There's only a few down here that were really explored there, that were really there and then made that happen. Here's a 0.1 of credential exchange, for example. And so moving it down there preserves the link for anyone who needs it for weird historical archaeology reasons, but makes it go away. Is anyone opposed to changing 348 to the retired status? Hearing no objections. Mechanically, there's 2 ways that we can actually make these. I think that doing a batch PR that changes the status of a number of things all at the same time would help keep this really clean instead of individual ones. We could do individual ones, but it's just a lot of push-ups to make it work. So I can either write this down, or if someone wants to volunteer to just open up a PR for status changes and then go ahead and apply these as we discuss them, that would be amazing. and that way we can submit it and have those changes made more rapidly. Any volunteers for that particular role? Okay, I will take notes, and I will do that PR after the meeting. Okay, the next one that I have up, these are not entirely in order. 3 protocols. So this one is a foundational one where we talk about protocol design and the basic principles all behind them. We talk about sub protocols and co-protocols a little bit, and some of this is a little bit more on the theoretical side, but it also describes the requirements, for example, for a protocol URI and other useful things that actually happen there, and some discussions of this. And so that I think is some more foundational reading, but I think a really useful thing to do. Any comments on 3? Stephen says yes. So 3, unless anyone objects, is going to move to adopted. Okay, 5 is similar. 5 is one that actually links to a handful of other defined RFCs that is kind of a directory of sorts of all the things that sort of comprise DIDCOM. We didn't call it DIDCOM back then, and we didn't have sort of all the things collected. We were just trying to figure stuff out, and so 5 was created actually after a lot of these other things to sort of combine them in there too. There's also a note about the existence of DIDCOM v2 that's actually happened there, with a note about detecting versions. Is anyone are people okay with 5 being moved to adopted? I think we should also probably move all of these to adopted, kind of for the same reason. Just because of the reference, and it's stuff we haven't really touched in a long time. Any comments or objections there?
I vote yes on adopting, because we treat most of those like they're adopted anyway.
Yes, definitely so. So 8 was in that list of the sub ones of there. So 8's included in the list of the 5 ones. Okay, so 23 is the DID exchange protocol. And I think we have sufficient adoption of DID exchange at this point to call it accepted, or adopted instead of just accepted. Any comments there? Uh, 31 is discover features, also in super common use. Any objections to moving that to adopted? (36) and 37 are issue credential and present proof 1. I had a little bit of consternation about this because they are pretty old at this point, and these may actually need to move to retired instead of adopted, even though I have them in the list here as adopted. Any thoughts on whether we go to adopted or retired as a status change for these? Is anyone still using the 1.0 versions of the protocols?
When you say using, could you elaborate? Are we talking about if people are implementing it outside of Akapai, or?
Well, yeah, well, 2 questions is, 1, is it still implemented? Like, is it still supported? And 2, is anyone like preferring that over like the 2.0, 2.x versions of the protocols?
So in some cases, we've been trying to push people off to using the 2.0 protocols, especially in newer implementations. There may be some instances where it's still supported in the wild.
It's definitely still supported,
Yeah.
still implemented. The question is it still being used? And I'm not sure enough.
You know the other status we don't have? Deprecated.
Yeah.
That would
Which
be
is kind of like old adopted, right? Like, hey, it's still there. We're still using this, but you shouldn't start using this now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
so. I mean, I'm in favor of kind of retiring it. We should be pushing to 2.0, in my opinion. But
We don't. I'm nervous about putting it retired because I don't want people to just go rip it out of the software, assuming that it isn't needed anymore. So
Yeah.
let me consider a deprecated status.
Yeah. Yeah. Good idea.
And so I'm going to
think,
move it to adopted now, but consider it for deprecated.
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay. There we go. 48 Trust Ping. This is super controversial. Any objections to moving that to adopted?
Nope.
You can tell by the lack of objections here that we should have done this a while ago, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, also 95 basic message.
Adopted.
Connection protocol. I have the same.
Yep. Deprecated.
Yeah. So let me do adopted, but candidate for deprecation.
Gonna need a new picture.
I'm gonna do it in Microsoft Paint with a little carrot. That's what I'm gonna do there. Okay, so 302 Aries interrupt profile. I feel weird about this one. We're definitely like 1.0, for example, is super in the adopted stage, but 2.0 is very much kind of in the accepted stage. And future ones will also have another weird status. So there's a couple things we can do here. Number one is that the next time we do a profile, it doesn't have to actually be in the same RFC. We could create a new one that refers to the previous one for process, but then still is just an RFC on its own. And that way we can indicate the status independently.
I mean, the purpose of the RFC is the concept of having a profile, and it contains profiles. I don't think we need to change that concept, and therefore it would be adopted.
We don't have to, but do we think it should be adopted instead of just accepted?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, let's do that.
To me, the 302 says we're going to have interop profiles. That's definitely a thing. And 302 contains profiles with a mechanism to add new ones and retire old ones and all the life cycle of interop profiles within it.
Right.
So, yeah, I think adopted makes sense.
Definitely. Okay, yeah. Out of band, 434.
Adopted.
Issue credential and present proof 2.
Yeah, adopted. The only problem with that one is 2.1 and 2.2 are problematic because neither of them actually have had any pickup.
Well, yes. And it's been suggested that when we address sort of the state of credential exchange protocols, that we narrow in on that topic, and perhaps those don't actually make the jump to next, whether that be 3 or 4.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
Let me move them to adopted. Should we add a status note about the .1 and .2?
I think we should. Okay, I'll put it on my list.
Okay. So 492, 592, 593, and 510. So 592 and 593 are the Indie attachment format, the JSON LD credential format, and what was the other one? 510? Is that still in PR form? Nope. Maybe? No.
Which one? Sorry.
I have 510 here. What
That's
probably have the wrong number.
presentation exchange, I believe. No, are you not looking in features? It should be in features.
There it is. I was just looking
Yeah.
at the wrong place in the order. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So these are formats for requesting and presenting credentials. So 592 is the one that we've been using for a long time. We just finally documented the thing.
No, 592 we've been using for a long time, and not it's we're adding a new one. But 592 is the indie, as it's called. Should be called the non-creds, but it's called indie because of its age.
Right.
And then 593 is the JSON LD attachments.
Yep.
And then 510 is diff presentation exchange.
Yes.
And so all of those are in active use and are adopted. There is a 700 range one for
that's the new one, right?
So there's two new ones. 592 has got an equivalent but called a non-creds. So it's not called indie, it's called a non-creds. It hasn't really gained any traction. And then there's 708, which is the brand new one, and it is going to be implemented. And so
Right.
it'll move up as it gets implemented.
Yep. Okay, so these are the attachments format used for credential exchange.
Yeah, and those are definitely all adopted.
Yeah, anyone object to an adoption status for that? Okay, we already talked about 348 in the chat. Daniel says 250 rich schema objects to retire. So if I clean up my tabs just slightly here, 250 rich schema objects.
Yeah.
Ooh, Ken and Brent. This was, I believe, the proposal for the 2.0 stuff that never actually happened.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, that's a trip down memory lane.
Yep.
Which indicates it's Daniel's suggestion is a good one. So this is 250. Is anyone objecting to 250 moving to retired?
Nope.
We definitely don't want people tripping over this.
Nope.
Because it was, proposed but then never implemented. Okay. Also in the chat. Nope, that was it. Subhas says, can we capture in each of the RFCs if they are AIP1 or AIP2 or both?
I mean, pretty much what we're saying is anything that's in AIP 1 and 2 is either going to go to deprecated or adopted. Anything in active use, anything that's been supplanted, like the V1 to V2 in credential exchange, those go. The V2 goes to adopted, the V1 goes to deprecated.
Right.
But anything in those two, with the exception of Please Act, which I think should go to retired because of all the, what we learned about Please Act is just, it's just not going to work.
Yeah, what I was suggesting is if in the RFC document itself, if it can be in the document, it's just easy for somebody looking at it to know whether it's an AIP 1 or 2 or both.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea. I'm reluctant to rope it into my current round of updates just because it's a little bit of a different purpose. But I think doing a PR to all of those RFCs and adding that note, I think would be definitely useful. So I'm super not opposed. Daniel, 627, static pure dids. This has been updated enough and its location is different. And he links to the new spec, but I agree that this ought to be retired. Is anyone opposed to retiring 627? All right, that's on the list. Excellent. Other adjustments folks want to make?
Can I ask a question? Retired, like I would like to look at the definition one more time. Does retired, it means that the RFC is retired, not the implementations.
It does, but it also indicates that it's kind of being withdrawn or not happening. So you don't need to remove it from your code, but I think it's more likely that's more likely to happen if folks see an RFC that has been retired. I think it's more likely to do so, which is why I'm a little cautious about calling like the 1.0 versions of the credential protocols retired, and I think that's probably why we need it deprecated, which is active but don't use it anymore. It's active on the way out, as opposed to retired, which I think indicates it's not active at all.
Yeah, what I'm trying to come to, Sam, is that there's a state of the RFC and then there's a state of the implementations. The RFC documents today contain details of implementations as well. So when someone is reading the RFC and they see that it's deprecated or retired, and then they see implementations, how is the reader supposed to conclude what's happening with the implementation? So then they have to jump into the implementation, see what's happening there to really conclude what's the final status of it.
I think that's probably what they'd have to do. The work to go through and make sure that none of the old RFCs where support has been removed are no longer listed in implementations is work that ideally would happen, but given how regularly we've been updating the status on these, I'm a little reluctant to place that expectation on the implementations list. So I
Yeah,
think its presence in the implementations probably signifies that it was implemented at one time, and you'll need to go check if it's a retired one.
yeah, and since that's the case, the definition, if it can mention a line that check the implementations to know what's happening with the implement. This is the status of the RFC, not the status of the implementation. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think that would be a pretty good update to make.
I mean, the implementation section has not been successful, to
Not
put it
been
mildly.
widely successful. It's been used a little. Part of the difficulty is just the upkeep required.
Yeah.
Shouldn't it just be the responsibility of each of the frameworks to just list what they support at a given time?
Yes, probably.
Yeah.
I think it will be easier, right? You can just go reference whichever you're using to see what's available.
Well, and the implementations list was also something that existed far before the AIPs.
Yeah.
If we push the usage of the RFC links as a way to understand what is in Aries, then the implementers are incented to make sure that the RFC document is up to date. So it's a little bit of a marketing play, if I may mention that. Right, you're coming to the RFC to know what the protocol is about, what it supports, and you are getting the latest up-to-date information about the implementation. It drives adoption and it helps somebody coming to the community to know where to get it. If you can tie all those pieces together, I know it's a lot of work, but if it can be used as a marketing tool.
Daniel's point in chat, I think, is good. It's obviously not enough of an incentive since nobody's doing it.
Right. So we got to find a way to tie it.
I think probably there's a limited amount of bandwidth that we're capable of messaging through or encouraging updates on. And I think if I was going to pick, I think I would rather promote the AIPs than individual protocols for support.
Yeah, the only concern, Sam, is that that information becomes stale because it's not updated and it misleads the user. It misleads the person visiting it. In that case, if we don't want to keep it up to date because you're working hard to make this thing really clean and good, which is great, but if the implementation section is not going to be kept up to date, then should we even have it there?
That's, I think, what Daniel's proposing as well, that we remove the implementation section from RFCs.
Yeah.
And interestingly, if we go back to the very first topic on this working group call, the request from the marketing committee to provide information about the implementations, it all ties together. Perhaps what would be a better thing to do would be maybe we should have an implementations document in the Aries RFC that says, here's what various implementations support. And
like a summary inside of a single doc.
Exactly, that anyone can put a PR in to talk about what their implementation does.
I like that, and that could actually be an RFC that we regularly update, kind of the way that others do. So that could be done. So I've flagged removing implementations for all RLFCs, and I think we could do that at the same time as an implementation status page to kind of actively talk about that.
Yeah, that's a good idea as an RFC itself. Yeah.
Well, that could be corresponding with the removal of the implementation list.
Yes. Yes.
But I'm not going to. Given that discussion, I think we should not do it as part of the status update PR that we planned for this.
No, that's fine.
Cool. Well, this is fantastic. I now have a list of RFCs of statuses to change, and so this page, the one I can't find anymore, is going to be to receive a substantial update when this regenerates after that PR. I'll go ahead and create that PR, and then we can, and then I would appreciate a couple people reviewing it just to make sure that I haven't done something that we didn't talk about. But that way we can go ahead and get that merged and have these updated, and I think that would be really good. Any other comments that folks want to make on RFC status?
So Stephen mentioned the Pleasac decorator.
Oh yeah,
RFC. Did we get that one talked about?
It's under Axe, right?
No. I believe it's Pleasac. There's a different one.
Is it a separate one?
Yeah.
There's a Pleasac. There's 317.
So this is the one that is A, part of AIP2, and B, really hard to implement as DSR had a person try to implement it, did a bunch of work on it and just didn't get there. I've been meaning to update AIP2 to remove it, put a PR to suggest we remove it. I think we should retire this one because I don't think it'll ever fly. As much fun as it is.
Any objections to retiring 317, Pleasac?
I think that this one should be done with AIP2 updates. So why don't we leave that one off, and I'll try to get that as a combination.
That sounds like a good plan.
Yeah.
Retiring it but leaving it in the AIP is a little bit confusing if someone's going to
Exactly. So let's combine those two. So leave it out of your update and I'll put in a PR.
I will leave it out of my update.
Okay.
Excellent. Any other comments on RFC status? Thanks, Daniel, for bringing that one up because I slipped past it. All right. Long-term support, $7.99. I wrote this. We got a bunch of review on it. Comments from Timo and others, and this was all that feedback I believe was incorporated by me after that. And so the current status of it, this is an RFC which describes our long-term support policies, and this describes generally what we ought to have within the various code repositories that are doing this with some guidelines on how to actually do that. With some support there. As a background, Hitachi which is a regular listener of these calls but not live, as the world is inconveniently round, mentioned that they found it difficult to integrate Aries projects into what they wanted to do. In that area of the world, they follow a much more traditional development timeline. It's less agile and more traditional, and they found it difficult to know which release they should actually build on, so that it didn't move around a lot. And that would allow them to adopt it easier. And since we're into adoption of these projects, this felt like definitely a worthy thing to talk about. And so that motivated the creation of this. And the main idea here is that you declare within a project an LTS release. When you declared an LTS, then you are, as a community, agreeing to provide support for it for 9 months after the next one is released. What that means is that you can move from LTS release to LTS release with at least 9 months of movement or of time to actually make that adjustment. So companies that are looking for stable and not bleeding edge have a way to hop up that. And this is familiar to anyone who's Ubuntu does this, right? This is the 1804, 2004, 2204. You're able to move an OS to the next long-term support release, which is really nice if you're not really looking for bleeding edge of the software, but you're looking for something nice and stable. There's notes in here about what can change and what should not change in a long-term support release. For example, API interfaces should not change, because that is problematic for people that are trying to deploy an update to get the security updates, but don't want to have to change other uncorrelated things. And so anyway, this is the whole document. It's not incredibly long here, and I tried to keep it as simple as I could. And we talk about what the release updates actually are. What this functionally looks like is that you often create a tag that can be referred to, and ideally a build if that's the type of thing that actually has happened. For example, if you produce a library that's in a library repository, then providing a link within the README to what the long-term support releases are is good. Everything else is really flexible, which means you can declare these as often or as infrequent as you want, or as makes sense to the project. And as long as you abide sort of the 9-month overlap, then it provides the support needed by implementers to do this. So we've incorporated feedback. Is there anyone at this point that would like more time to review this, or that hasn't yet had a chance to submit feedback on this that they would like? Is anyone opposed to merging long-term support 799? All right, that has been recorded, and we'll go ahead and get that merged. I think it's got to be approved by someone that isn't me, since I submitted it. But we've got the comment in there that we've discussed this. And with that, we're about out of time. Anything that folks want to mention or bring up in the last minute or two that we have here? I thank you for your attendance and involvement. This is a little tedious, but important to do this as a group so that we can move relatively fast on the update of the status on these. And we made good progress today. Appreciate you being here, and I hope that your week is a great one, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Sam. Have a good one.